Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, the home of love, passion, and deep emotions. I am truly grateful for each and every one of you. Your support, your love, and your presence mean everything to me. Before we begin, let's take a moment to pray together as one beautiful family. A beautiful prayer for Mr. Peter. Stories family, Heavenly Father, today we come before you with grateful hearts, lifting up the beautiful family of Mr. Peter Stories. You have brought us together from different places, different backgrounds, and different walks of life, but our hearts are united in love and kindness. Lord, bless every soul that listens, watches, and supports this journey. Let their lives be filled with joy, success, and endless love. May they find peace in their struggles, strength in their challenges, and hope in every new day. For those facing difficulties, be their guiding light. For those seeking love, fill their hearts with warmth. For those chasing dreams, open doors of opportunity. And for every single person here, Lord, let them feel your presence, your protection, and your endless love. We declare greatness over our lives. We declare joy, peace, and abundance. No evil shall come near us, and no negativity shall steal our happiness. Thank you, Lord, for this beautiful family. Thank you for the love we share, and thank you for the many blessings yet to come. In your holy name we pray. Amen. My beautiful family, are you satisfied? My beautiful family, I put my heart into every story, every word, and every emotion I share with you. Are you enjoying my work? Am I improving, or do I need to work harder? Your feedback is my greatest motivation, and I want to give you the best storytelling experience possible. Let me know in the comments. Do my stories touch your heart? Your love and support mean everything to me, and I want to keep growing for you. Let's take attendance, the unique way. Now, my beautiful family, let's celebrate our global love and unity. Drop your country in the comments, and let's see where our Mr. Peter Stories family is watching from. Here are famous phrases from places where Black lives shine brightly. Do you recognize any of these? USA, in God we trust. Caribbean, one love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. UK, keep calm and carry on. Canada, sorry, because we know Canadians are the politest people. Ghana, Akwaba, a warm welcome because hospitality is everything. South Africa, Ubuntu, I am because we are. France, liberté, égalité, fraternité. Liberty, equality, fraternity, a symbol of unity. Australia, no worries, mate. Kenya, Hakuna Matata, no worries. Nigeria, no wahala, meaning no problem, because Nigerians handle everything. Jamaica, we likla, but we talawa. We may be small, but we are mighty. Haiti, l'union fait la force, unity is strength. Trinidad and Tobago, we jammin' still. No matter what, we keep moving. Ethiopia, land of origins, where history and pride begin. Brazil, é nós, it's us, a phrase full of community and spirit. Cuba, patria o muerte, venceremos, fatherland or death, we shall overcome. Dominican Republic, que lo que, what's up, the ultimate DR greeting. Barbados, wu guignon, how's it going, Bajan style? Senegal, teranga, a single word for deep hospitality and warmth. Ivory Coast, yako, a way of showing deep empathy and care. Tanzania, pole, slowly, slowly, life is a journey, enjoy the process. Zimbabwe, shona yedu inotapira, our language is sweet, pride in culture. Angola, força, strength, a word of encouragement and power. Cameroon, ça va aller, it will be okay, hope and resilience. My beautiful family, where are you watching from today? Represent in the comments and let's fill this space with love, culture, and unity. Thank you for being part of this journey. Now, let's begin today's story with passion and excitement. Lottie Grace stared at her phone, reading the message for the fifth time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. We can't send you money anymore. You're on your own now. Her mother's text was brief, clinical, devoid of the warmth that had always characterized their relationship. No explanation, no apology, just a severing of financial ties that left Lottie suspended in midair 3 weeks before her semester fees were due. She sat on the edge of her bed in the small studio apartment she could no longer afford, her fingers trembling as she attempted to call home, straight to voicemail. Again and again. After the 12th attempt, she hurled her phone against the wall, watching as it clattered to the floor, screen intact, too sturdy to grant her even the satisfaction of destruction. Lottie had never considered herself privileged. Yes, she came from a well-established family with a successful import business, but she'd worked hard for her scholarship to one of the country's most prestigious universities. Her parents covered her living expenses and the remainder of her tuition, but she'd earned her place through merit, not money. Now, in her final year of pre-law, everything was falling apart. 3 increasingly desperate days later, her roommate Jasmine found her surrounded by rejection emails from emergency loan applications. "There's another option," Jasmine said quietly, perching on the arm of Lottie's second-hand sofa. "I didn't want to mention it, but..." She hesitated. "At this point, I'll consider anything that doesn't involve selling organs," Lottie replied, attempting humor that fell flat even to her own ears. Jasmine's eyes didn't meet hers. "There's this man, Mitchell Santner, the tech billionaire? What about him? He helps girls like us, girls who need money fast." The implication hung in the air between them. Lottie felt her stomach twist into a knot. "You can't be serious." Lottie stood up, pacing the small living area. "You're suggesting I sleep with some rich guy for money?" Jasmine shrugged. "One night with him and your worries will be over. He pays well and he's discreet. My cousin did it last year when her dad got sick. I'm not a prostitute, Jazz. It's not like that. It's an arrangement. Look, I'm not saying it's ideal, but what other options do you have? You've tried everything else." Lottie wanted to argue, to claim moral high ground, but the truth hammered at her temples. Semester fees due in 2 weeks, rent overdue, $3 in her checking account, and $27 in savings. No job would pay enough fast enough. "I'll think about it," she finally said, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. She didn't sleep that night, alternating between disgust at the idea and cold calculations of necessity. By morning, resignation had settled in her chest like a stone. "How would I even contact him?" she asked Jasmine over their shared breakfast of instant coffee. 3 days later, Lottie stood outside the presidential suite of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, smoothing down the only cocktail dress she owned, a simple black number she'd worn to her cousin's wedding. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her makeup minimal but precise. She'd spent 30 minutes in the hotel lobby bathroom giving herself a pep talk, reminding herself that this was a business transaction. Nothing more. One night. One solution. She would survive this with her dignity intact. She knocked. The door opened to reveal a man who looked nothing like the smiling figure featured in tech magazines. Mitchell Santner in person was taller, colder, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. His dark hair was styled with military precision, his gray suit impeccably tailored to his athletic frame. But it was his eyes that struck her, pale blue and utterly devoid of warmth, like a predator assessing prey. "Lottie Grace," he said, her name sounding foreign on his tongue. Not a question, but a declaration. "Mr. Santner," she replied, grateful that her voice remained steady. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter with a practiced sweep of his arm. The suite was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in shades of cream and gold that screamed old money despite the owner's nouveau riche status. "Drink?" he asked, already pouring amber liquid into crystal tumblers without awaiting her response. "No, thank you." He paused, the decanter suspended mid-pour, before continuing to fill the second glass anyway. "You'll want it," he said simply. Lottie remained standing, though every instinct urged her to flee. Mitchell handed her the unwanted drink before settling into a leather armchair, legs spread in casual dominance, watching her over the rim of his glass. "Your friend Jasmine says you're in financial trouble." The directness caught her off guard. "I prefer to call it a temporary setback." A mirthless smile tugged at his lips. "Pride. Interesting." He sipped his whiskey. "Let's not waste time. You need money for your education. I have money. I require certain companionship in exchange. Is that arrangement acceptable to you?" The clinical way he framed it, like a business proposal, somehow made it worse. Lottie's fingers tightened around the untouched glass. "Why someone like me?" she asked suddenly. "Surely there are professional escorts who would—" "I don't want professionals." His interruption was sharp. "I want women who aren't accustomed to this arrangement, women with something to lose." His eyes scraped over her body with insulting deliberation. "Women who will remember their night with Mitchell Santner." Nausea rose in her throat. She set the glass down on a nearby table with a controlled movement before it could slip from her trembling fingers. "I see," she managed. Mitchell stood abruptly, invading her personal space with 2 long strides. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "Do you know why I agreed to meet you specifically, Lottie Grace?" he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper as one finger traced the line of her jaw. She stepped back. "I assume Jasmine spoke highly of me. Jasmine said you were desperate and proud, an intriguing combination." He followed her retreat. "But no, that's not why. I agreed because when I saw your picture, I noticed you share a remarkable resemblance to my wife." The confession hit her like ice water. "You have a wife?" Mitchell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course I have a wife. Did you think I was lonely?" He circled her slowly, like a shark. "I will sleep with you tonight so you won't be jealous if I have kids with my wife." The words were so unexpected, so deliberately cruel, that for a moment Lottie couldn't process them. When understanding dawned, it felt like a physical blow. "You think I'm—" Words failed her. "A gold digger? An opportunist? Yes." Mitchell shrugged. "But I'm still willing to help you with your little financial problem." Something snapped inside her. Pride, perhaps, or the last thread of self-deception that had allowed her to walk into this room. "You don't know me," Lottie said, her voice low and controlled, despite the rage building behind her ribs. "You don't know anything about me or my situation." "I know enough," he countered, refilling his glass. "You're here, aren't you?" Lottie straightened her back, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Yes, I am. But after tonight, I will never see you again. If I weren't in this situation, I wouldn't be here. I am not one of those women who sell their pride for money. You will regret your words." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, at being challenged. It vanished quickly, replaced by cool amusement. "We'll see," he murmured, setting down his glass and approaching her again. This time, when his fingers touched her face, they trailed down to the zipper of her dress. "Shall we begin?" Lottie closed her eyes, steeling herself against the revulsion crawling across her skin. One night. Just one night, and she would never have to see Mitchell Santner again. She nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Hours later, as moonlight cut across the darkened hotel room, Lottie lay awake beside the sleeping billionaire. Their encounter had been physically satisfying, but emotionally hollow. Mitchell was skilled but detached, treating her body like an expensive toy he'd soon discard. She slipped silently from the bed, gathering her scattered clothing with methodical care. In the bathroom, she avoided her reflection as she dressed, unable to face the woman who had made this choice. When she emerged, Mitchell was awake, watching her from the bed. "There's an envelope on the desk," he said, voice husky with sleep. "It should cover whatever financial troubles you're facing." Lottie approached the desk, eyeing the thick envelope without touching it. Inside, she knew, would be enough money to pay her tuition, her rent, maybe even enough to survive until graduation. All she had to do was take it. "Keep it," she said quietly. Mitchell sat up, sheets pooling around his waist. "Excuse me?" "I said keep it." Lottie turned to face him, chin lifted. "I've changed my mind." Confusion creased his forehead. "About the money, or about our arrangement?" "Both." She smoothed her dress, tugging on her coat. "I'd rather drop out than take your money after the things you said to me." Mitchell's laugh was sharp with disbelief. "Don't be ridiculous, you need this money." "Yes, I do," Lottie acknowledged, hand on the doorknob. "But I need my self-respect more. Goodbye, Mr. Santner." As the door closed behind her, Lottie expected to feel regret, panic, or doubt. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. She had come to this hotel room ready to sacrifice her dignity for financial security. Instead, she was leaving with something far more valuable intact, her sense of self-worth. She would find another way. She had to. Chapter 2. Pride in Ruins. Mitchell Santner's morning ritual never varied. Wake at 5 a.m., exercise for precisely 45 minutes, shower for 7 minutes, dress in one of 30 identical custom suits, and consume a protein-rich breakfast while reviewing global markets. Control and consistency were the twin pillars of his success, a success that had transformed him from a middle-class nobody into one of the 30 wealthiest men in America. But this morning, as San Francisco fog pressed against the windows of his penthouse, he found himself standing motionless before his closet, mind replaying the events of the previous night. She had refused his money. In 15 years of similar arrangements, no woman had ever walked away from Mitchell Santner's money. They negotiated for more, certainly. They sometimes feigned reluctance, but they always took it in the end. Except Lottie Grace. Her refusal nagged at him like a loose thread in an otherwise immaculate garment. "Mr. Santner," his personal assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 7:30 call with Tokyo is in 5 minutes." Mitchell cleared his throat. "I'll take it in my office." He forced Lottie from his thoughts, locking her away in the compartmentalized section of his mind reserved for completed transactions. His day proceeded with mathematical precision, calls, meetings, decisions involving hundreds of millions of dollars, until his phone buzzed with an unusual name on the caller ID. Victoria. His wife. Mitchell frowned. Victoria never called during business hours, another element of their carefully structured arrangement. He'd married her for her social connections and impeccable bloodline. She'd married him for his money and the freedom it provided to pursue her artistic interests in Paris, far from San Francisco and her husband. They met quarterly for public appearances and annually for legal purposes. It was a marriage of mutual convenience. "Victoria," he answered, voice neutral. "This is unexpected." "Not as unexpected as the photos I just received," she replied, her cultured voice tight with controlled fury. "Check your email." Mitchell opened his laptop, clicking on the email notification that had just appeared. The attached images loaded slowly, then abruptly filled his screen. Mitchell entering the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. Mitchell with his hand on the small of a woman's back, Lottie's back. Mitchell kissing the same woman in the hotel elevator. "Who is she?" Victoria asked, the question sharp as a blade. "No one important," Mitchell replied automatically. "A momentary diversion." A momentary diversion. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Like the redhead in Chicago last month, or the twins in Miami over Christmas. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Mitchell's spine stiffened. Our arrangement has always included discretion and freedom, Victoria. Discretion, yes. But these photos came from TMZ, Mitchell. There's nothing discreet about having your infidelities splashed across gossip sites. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You've humiliated me for the last time. Victoria, my attorney will contact yours this afternoon. Enjoy the media circus, darling. The line went dead. Mitchell stared at his phone, a cold weight settling in his stomach. He'd been careful, always careful, to keep his extracurricular activities hidden from both the public and his wife. Someone had been watching him. Someone had sold those photos. His office door opened without a knock, something that never happened, and his chief of staff entered, face grim. We have a situation, Martin said, tablet in hand. TMZ just published photos of you with an unidentified woman entering the Grand Metropolitan last night. Social media is already speculating about an affair. Handle it, Mitchell ordered, returning to his computer. There's more. Martin's voice held an unusual note of hesitation. The woman... Twitter users are claiming she's a student at Berkeley. They're painting it as a rich man paying for sex with a broke college student. Mitchell's head snapped up. What? The story is trending. Major outlets are picking it up. Martin placed the tablet on Mitchell's desk, open to a headline. Tech billionaire Mitchell Santner, caught in sex scandal with college student. Beneath it was a grainy but recognizable photo of Lottie entering his hotel room. Find her, Mitchell ordered, a muscle ticking in his jaw. Find out who she is, what she wants. If this is some kind of blackmail scheme. She hasn't made any statements, Martin interrupted. She's not responding to media inquiries. If it's blackmail, she's playing a long game. For a fleeting moment, Mitchell recalled Lottie's parting words. You will regret your words. Had this been her plan all along? To humiliate him publicly. Get our PR team working on damage control, Mitchell said, mind already calculating the potential financial fallout. Draft a statement about a consensual relationship between adults. Make it clear there was no payment involved. Martin nodded, making notes. And Victoria? What about her? She's giving an exclusive interview to People magazine tomorrow. The controlled facade Mitchell had maintained for decades cracked slightly. She what? Her representative contacted them an hour ago. The angle is, wronged wife speaks out about serial cheater husband. Mitchell's hand curled into a fist on his desk. Get my attorney on the phone, now. 3 weeks later, Mitchell sat alone in his home office, surveying the wreckage of his carefully constructed life through the bottom of a crystal tumbler. Scotch, his third of the evening, burned a path down his throat that did nothing to warm the cold hollowness in his chest. The divorce proceedings had started with Victoria's bombshell interview, in which she detailed not only his infidelity, but also his emotional absence, his controlling nature, his obsession with power. The public, primed by years of anti-tech sentiment, embraced the narrative of Mitchell Santner as a villain, the embodiment of everything wrong with wealth and privilege in America. Santner Tech stock had dropped 18% in the first week after the scandal broke. The board was discussing a forced sabbatical. 3 major clients had already withdrawn from pending contracts, citing ethical concerns. His phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Wall Street Journal running feature tomorrow on your pattern of exploitation. 3 more women have come forward claiming similar hotel meetings. Need comment ASAP. Mitchell didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Yes, there had been other women before Lottie, many others. All consensual, all compensated generously for their time and discretion. None had ever complained. until now when blood was in the water and the sharks were circling. He poured another drink, the liquid sloshing over the edge as his usually steady hand trembled slightly. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built an empire on his ability to predict human behavior, to understand motivations and manipulate outcomes. Yet he'd catastrophically misjudged the one woman who'd now catalyzed his downfall, Lottie Grace. His team had compiled a dossier on her the day after the photos leaked. 24 years old, partial scholarship to Berkeley Law. Parents owned an import business in Atlanta that had recently filed for bankruptcy, explaining her sudden financial crisis. No criminal record, no history of extortion or scams, just a young woman trying to stay in school after her family's financial collapse. A young woman he had insulted, used, and discarded. Mitchell drained his glass, the alcohol no longer providing even the illusion of comfort. He'd tried to contact her through intermediaries, of course, offering substantial sums for her public support, or at least her silence. She'd refused all overtures. His phone rang. Martin again. Mitchell silenced it without answering. For the first time in his adult life, Mitchell Santner was facing a problem money couldn't solve. His reputation was in tatters. His company was faltering. His marriage was over. His carefully constructed world was collapsing, and he had no one to blame but himself. Depression settled over him like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. The penthouse that had once represented his success now felt like a mausoleum, a monument to everything he'd lost. In the darkest hours of the night, when the scotch had dulled his defenses and honesty crept in, Mitchell admitted the truth to himself. Lottie had been right. He was reaping what he'd sown, harvesting the bitter fruit of years of treating people as commodities. You will regret your words. He already did, more than she could possibly know. Chapter 3, Unexpected Consequences. 6 months after the night that had altered the trajectory of her life, Lottie Grace had established a new normal. The media frenzy had eventually died down, though not before forcing her to withdraw from Berkeley temporarily. The university had discreetly offered her an emergency scholarship in exchange for her silence about the scandal. They had no desire to be dragged further into the Mitchell-Santner debacle. Lottie had accepted the scholarship, but deferred her return until the following semester. She needed time to process everything that had happened, to rebuild her sense of self away from the scrutiny and whispers. She had found a job at Eloise, an upscale restaurant in the financial district, where the manager had hired her with a knowing look, but no questions. The pay was decent, the tips were excellent, and most importantly, the wealthy clientele usually treated her as invisible, just another element of the restaurant's elegant ambiance. Tonight, the Friday dinner rush was in full swing. Lottie moved gracefully between tables, balancing plates of exquisitely prepared food, her practiced smile never faltering despite the growing discomfort in her lower back. The early autumn heat wave wasn't helping matters, making her fitted black uniform cling uncomfortably to her skin. "Table 7 needs their check," Julian, another server, murmured as they passed in the narrow corridor to the kitchen. "On it," Lottie replied, adjusting her path. She was halfway across the dining room when she felt it. A prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the unmistakable weight of someone's gaze. She turned slowly, scanning the crowded restaurant until her eyes locked with a pair of familiar pale blue ones. Mitchell Santner sat alone at a corner table, a half-empty tumbler of amber liquid before him. He looked different, thinner, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. The pristine suit remained, but it hung on his frame as if tailored for a larger man. His hair was longer, less rigorously styled, and dark shadows underscored his eyes. For a suspended moment, neither moved. The busy restaurant continued its symphony of conversation and clinking glasses around them. But between Mitchell and Lottie, time seemed to stop, compressing 6 months of changes into a single frozen second. Lottie broke the connection first, turning abruptly toward table 7, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her hands trembled slightly as she presented the check to the middle-aged couple dining there, but her voice remained steady. "Whenever you're ready," she said, placing the leather folder on the table. "There's no rush." She felt Mitchell's eyes following her as she moved to her next table, then the next, deliberately keeping her back to his corner of the restaurant. Julian approached her as she entered the kitchen. "The guy at table 12 is asking for you specifically," he said, eyebrows raised in question. "Table 12, Mitchell's table. Tell him I'm not available," Lottie replied, busying herself with arranging desserts on a tray. Julian shrugged. "Your call, but he's tipping heavily." "I don't care." For the rest of her shift, Lottie executed an elaborate dance of avoidance, ensuring another server covered Mitchell's table while she focused on the opposite side of the restaurant. She told herself it was dignity, not fear, that kept her away from him. 3 hours later, as the dinner service wound down, Lottie entered the employee locker room, exhaustion weighing heavily on her shoulders. She changed from her work shoes to comfortable flats, massaging her swollen ankles with a wince. "You look like you could use this," said Alina, the bartender, appearing in the doorway with a glass of water and 2 ibuprofen tablets. "Lifesaver," Lottie murmured gratefully, accepting both. "Rough night?" "Just tired." Lottie swallowed the pills, avoiding Alina's knowing gaze. "That guy at 12 is still here," Alina said casually. 3 hours, 1 drink, watching the door to the back like a hawk. "Not my problem. He left this for you." Alina held out a folded piece of paper. "Asked me to make sure you got it." Against her better judgment, Lottie accepted the note, unfolding it after Alina left. The handwriting was precise, almost architectural in its precision. 5 minutes of your time. Please. Mess. She crumpled the paper, tossing it into the trash. Whatever Mitchell Santner wanted from her, she had no interest in providing it. His scandal had upended her life enough already. Gathering her belongings, Lottie slipped her coat over her uniform dress, acutely aware that the material strained slightly around her midsection. Another problem for another day. She exited through the back door, a precaution she'd taken since the media frenzy had first erupted. The alley behind Eloise connected to a side street that led directly to the bus stop, a route that avoided the restaurant's main entrance and any lingering paparazzi who might still recognize her. Tonight, however, her escape route was blocked. Mitchell Santner stood in the narrow alley, hands thrust deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cool night air. He straightened when he saw her, his expression a complex mixture of determination and uncertainty, an expression she'd never seen on his face before. "Stalking me now?" Lottie asked, stopping several yards away. "I needed to see you," he replied, his voice rougher than she remembered. "I have nothing to say to you." She moved to step around him, but Mitchell shifted, not blocking her path exactly, but making it clear he wasn't finished. "I didn't leak those photos," he said quickly. "I had nothing to do with the media coverage." Lottie laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "Is that supposed to make me feel better? Your scandal cost me my privacy, my peace of mind, and nearly my education. I'm sorry." The words seemed to physically pain him. "What happened to you was collateral damage. I never intended." "Collateral damage?" Lottie repeated incredulously. "Is that how you see people, as acceptable losses in your personal wars?" Mitchell flinched as if she'd struck him. "That came out wrong. Did it? Or is it just the first honest thing you've said to me?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "I've had 6 months of brutal honesty, Lottie. My life has been dissected in public, my motivations analyzed by strangers, my character assassinated daily." "Poor billionaire," she mocked, anger flaring hot in her chest. "Did your actions finally have consequences?" "Yes," he said simply, the admission catching her off guard. Yes, they did. And I deserved most of them. The unexpected humility momentarily silenced her. Mitchell took advantage of her hesitation to step closer, close enough that she could see the new lines etched around his eyes, smell the faint scent of expensive liquor on his breath. I didn't come here to defend myself, he continued. I came because... He trailed off, his gaze dropping from her face to sweep over her body in a way that was different from his previous appraisals, less predatory, more inquisitive. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as they lingered on the subtle curve of her abdomen, partially concealed by her coat, but visible now that he was looking for it. "You're pregnant," he said, the words barely audible. Lottie instinctively wrapped her coat tighter around herself, a protective gesture. "That's none of your business." Mitchell's face drained of color. "Is it mine?" she finished firmly. "This baby is mine." "But biologically..." "Yes," she interrupted, unwilling to hear him voice the connection between them. "Biologically, you are the father. Practically, you are nothing." Mitchell stepped back as if she'd slapped him, genuine shock registering on his features. For a long moment, he said nothing, processing this new information with visible difficulty. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, softer, almost reverent. "A baby." "My baby," Lottie corrected. "Our baby," he countered, something fierce flashing in his eyes. "Number, you don't get to claim this child. You made your opinion of me quite clear that night, and I have no reason to believe you'd view this baby any differently. As an inconvenience, a complication to be managed with money." Mitchell ran a hand through his hair, disarranging it further. "You're right about how I treated you. I was cruel, dismissive. I saw you as..." He struggled visibly with his words. "I saw you as a transaction, but this changes everything." "It changes nothing," Lottie insisted. "I don't need your money. I don't need your involvement. What I need is for you to respect my decision to raise this child on my own." "You can't be serious," Mitchell said, a hint of his former arrogance resurfacing. "You're working as a waitress. Living where? On what? How will you finish your degree with a newborn?" "I'll manage," she replied, chin lifting in defiance. "I always do." "Let me help," he pressed, stepping closer again. "Let's go home. Quit this job. I will take care of everything." The words, so similar to what he might have said to any problem requiring his money to solve, ignited Lottie's temper. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" she demanded, voice low but intense. "I will sleep with you tonight so you won't be jealous if I have kids with my wife. You thought I was for sale. I wasn't then, and I'm not now, and neither is this baby." Mitchell blanched. "Lottie, I was wrong. I'm not the same man." "Leave," she interrupted, "or I'll call security." For a moment, it seemed he might argue further. Then, shoulders slumping in defeat, Mitchell stepped aside. "This isn't over," he said quietly as she passed him. "That's my child, too." Lottie paused, turning to face him one last time. "No, Mitchell, this is over. It was over the moment you decided I was beneath you." She walked away, back straight, pace steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. She didn't look back to see Mitchell standing motionless in the alley, watching her disappear into the night with his world fundamentally altered for the second time in 6 months. Only when she was safely on the bus, hidden among tired commuters, did Lottie allow herself to rest a protective hand on her stomach. "It's just us," she whispered to the life growing within her. "And we're going to be fine." But as the bus carried her toward her small apartment in a neighborhood that grew more dangerous by the block, Lottie couldn't quite silence the whisper of doubt that crept through her determination. She had rejected Mitchell Santner and his money twice now, first from pride, now from principle. She only hoped her principles would keep her child fed and safe in the months to come. Chapter 4. Twin miracles. The contractions began during the dinner rush on a rainy Tuesday evening in March, just as Lottie was balancing a tray of martinis for a table of investment bankers. The first wave hit with such unexpected intensity that she nearly dropped the entire order, saving it only through sheer willpower and a steadying hand from Julian. "You okay?" he asked, concern evident in his eyes as he took the tray from her trembling hands. "Fine," Lottie lied, forcing a smile. "Just a little twinge." But the second contraction, barely 5 minutes later, drove her to her knees beside the service station, clutching the edge of the counter as waves of pain radiated through her lower back and abdomen. "That's not a twinge," Elena observed, kneeling beside her. "That's labor. How far along are you?" 36 weeks, Lottie gasped as the pain subsided. "But it's too early. I still have a month." Elena's eyebrows shot up. "Honey, babies don't always follow schedules. We need to get you to a hospital." "I just need a minute," Lottie insisted, struggling to her feet. "I can finish my shift." The restaurant manager, alerted by Julian, appeared at her side. "Not happening," he said firmly. "Marcus will cover your tables. Who can we call for you?" The question hung in the air, highlighting a truth Lottie had been avoiding. She had no one. Her parents, still struggling with bankruptcy, remained distant. Most of her friends had drifted away during the scandal. She had deliberately isolated herself these past months, focusing solely on survival. "I'll take an Uber," she said, reaching for her phone. "Like hell you will," Elena replied, already removing her bartender's apron. "I'm driving you." 20 minutes later, as they sat gridlocked in rush-hour traffic, another contraction gripped Lottie with such force that she cried out, her fingernails digging half-moons into the car's armrest. "These are coming too fast," Elena said, anxiety edging her voice as she honked uselessly at the wall of cars ahead. "Is there anyone who should know you're in labor?" "Family, friend, the baby's father." Lottie shook her head, then hesitated. Despite everything, a primal urge to not be alone in this moment overwhelmed her pride. "My phone," she gasped between breaths. "Contacts. Under Do Not Answer." Elena found the number, the only one listed under that warning, and pressed dial before Lottie could reconsider. The call connected on the second ring. "Lottie?" Mitchell's voice held a note of disbelief. They hadn't spoken since their confrontation in the alley 3 months ago, though Lottie knew he had continued patronizing Eloise, always requesting a table in her section, always accepting her refusal to serve him. "She's in labor," Elena said briskly. "We're stuck in traffic trying to get to San Francisco General. Who am I speaking with?" A moment of silence then. "Mitchell Santner, the baby's father. Where exactly are you?" Elena provided their location while Lottie endured another contraction, this one leaving her breathless and trembling. "I'll have a medical team there in 10 minutes, Mitchell said, voice shifting from shock to decisive action. "Don't move." 8 minutes later, as Lottie's contractions reached new heights of intensity, the gridlocked traffic parted for flashing lights. Not an ambulance, as she'd expected, but a private medical helicopter that descended onto the cleared street with military precision. "What the?" Elena began as 2 paramedics rushed toward their car. "Ms. Grace?" one asked as they opened the passenger door. "Mr. Santner arranged for transport to Mount Sinai Medical Center. They're expecting you." "No," Lottie protested weakly, another contraction stealing her breath. "San Francisco General is fine. Mount Sinai has the best NICU in the state," the paramedic interrupted gently, "for premature births." The mention of possible danger to her baby silenced Lottie's objections. She allowed them to transfer her to a stretcher and load her into the helicopter, Elena promising to follow by car. As they lifted off, Lottie closed her eyes against the vertigo, focusing instead on the rhythm of her breathing as the paramedics had instructed. By the time they landed on the hospital roof, The contractions were coming less than 2 minutes apart. A team of medical professionals awaited her arrival, whisking her directly to a private delivery suite that looked more like a luxury hotel room than a hospital. Among the team, a distinguished older woman introduced herself as Dr. Reynolds, the head of obstetrics. "You're progressing rapidly," she informed Lottie after a brief examination. 7 centimeters dilated already. We need to monitor the baby's heart rate. As they positioned sensors on Lottie's swollen abdomen, Dr. Reynolds paused, her experienced hands moving methodically across the taut skin. "Did you know you're carrying twins?" she asked, adjusting an ultrasound wand. Lottie's eyes widened in shock. "What? No, that's impossible. My doctor only ever mentioned 1 heartbeat." Dr. Reynolds turned the monitor toward her, pointing at 2 distinct shapes. "Twin girls, from the look of it. The second one was likely hidden behind her sister during previous scans. It happens occasionally, especially if you didn't have many ultrasounds." The revelation struck Lottie with the force of another contraction. Twins. Not 1 baby, but 2. Twice the responsibility, twice the joy, twice the challenge. The enormity of it overwhelmed her already taxed emotions, and tears sprang to her eyes. "I can't," she began, panic rising. "I wasn't prepared for 1 baby, let alone 2. A nurse squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You're not alone. We'll help you through this." But Lottie was alone. Fundamentally, ultimately alone in the most important journey of her life. The realization broke something inside her, releasing months of carefully controlled fear and uncertainty. Outside the delivery suite, in the private waiting area that had been cleared for his exclusive use, Mitchell Santner paced like a caged animal. He had arrived at the hospital mere minutes after the helicopter, having chartered a private jet from Los Angeles where he'd been attempting to salvage a business deal. Now, dressed in a rumpled suit with no tie, he wore a path in the expensive carpet, stopping only to interrogate any medical staff who entered. "Mr. Santner," a nurse called from the doorway, "Ms. Grace is ready to deliver. We need to know if you'll be in the room." Mitchell froze. "Does she want me there?" The nurse's expression softened slightly. "She hasn't specified, but she's asking for someone, anyone, to hold her hand. She's frightened." Something twisted in Mitchell's chest, an unfamiliar ache that took him a moment to identify as genuine concern for someone other than himself. Not concern for his investment or his reputation or his legacy, but for Lottie herself. "Tell her I'm here," he said quietly. "The choice is hers." 2 minutes later, Mitchell found himself being hastily outfitted in sterile garments, his hands scrubbed to surgical cleanliness, as a nurse briefed him on what to expect. "Don't faint, don't get in the doctor's way, and whatever you do, don't tell her to just breathe or push harder," the nurse instructed. "Those phrases have caused more delivery room injuries to fathers than you'd believe." Before Mitchell could process the implications of being referred to as a father, he was ushered into the delivery suite. Lottie lay on the bed, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, face contorted in pain as another contraction seized her. When her eyes met his, they widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. "What is he doing here?" she demanded between gasps. "Moral support, doctor," Reynolds replied without looking up from her position. "You can throw him out after the birth if you want." Mitchell approached cautiously, stopping a respectful distance from the bed. "I can leave if you prefer," he offered, his usual confidence nowhere in evidence. Lottie opened her mouth to refuse him, but another contraction, the strongest yet, tore through her instead. Her hand shot out instinctively, grasping for something to anchor herself against the pain. Mitchell stepped forward, allowing her fingers to close around his with crushing force. "I'm here," he said simply. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Lottie alternated between determined silence and raw, guttural sounds that Mitchell had never heard from a human before. She broke two of his fingers during one particularly intense contraction, but he didn't pull away, didn't even flinch. At 9:47 p.m., the first tiny, wrinkled body emerged into the world with a surprisingly powerful cry. Mitchell caught a glimpse of dark hair and flailing limbs before the nurses whisked the infant away for immediate assessment. "She looks good, Doctor," Reynolds announced. "Ready for round 2, Lottie." Mitchell had barely processed the existence of his daughter, when Lottie's grip tightened again with renewed purpose. 17 minutes later, a second cry joined the first, as Twin B made her entrance, slightly smaller than her sister but equally vocal in her displeasure at being thrust into the bright, cold world. "Two healthy girls," the doctor confirmed after initial assessments. "A bit small as expected with twins, but strong lungs and good color." Mitchell stood frozen beside the bed, his universe fundamentally altered for the third time since meeting Lottie Grace. He had awoken that morning as a disgraced businessman attempting to rebuild his empire. He was ending it as a father to twin daughters whose existence he'd only learned of hours ago. "Would you like to hold them?" a nurse asked, approaching with a carefully swaddled bundle. Before Mitchell could answer, Lottie's exhausted voice intervened. "I want to see them first." The nurses brought both infants to her, placing them gently in the crooks of her arms. Lottie stared down at their tiny faces, nearly identical except for a small birthmark on the second twin's left shoulder. With an expression of wonder and fierce protectiveness, "They're beautiful," she whispered, touching each tiny cheek with a trembling finger. Mitchell moved closer, drawn by an instinct older than civilization itself. "They look like you," he observed softly, noting the curves of their delicate mouths, the rich brown of their skin, the determined set of their miniature chins. "They have your eyes," Lottie replied, then looked up at him directly for the first time since he'd entered the room. "What are you doing here, Mitchell?" The question held no hostility now, only genuine curiosity and bone-deep fatigue. "I got a call that you were in labor," he answered simply. "Where else would I be?" "Anywhere. Everywhere. You didn't have to come." "Yes," Mitchell said with quiet certainty. "I did." Lottie studied him for a long moment, taking in his disheveled appearance, the intensity of his gaze as he looked at their daughters, the unusual vulnerability in his expression. "You can hold them," she finally said, "but you can't hold them until I wake up." The nurses took this as their cue, gently removing the twins from Lottie's arms as her eyes drifted closed, exhaustion finally claiming her. They guided Mitchell to a nearby chair, showing him how to support the first infant's head as they placed her in his arms. Mitchell had held many things in his life: power, wealth, influence, but nothing had ever felt like the weight of this tiny human who shared his blood. She was impossibly small, impossibly perfect, her miniature fingers curled into a fist against his chest. As he stared down at her, she opened her eyes, pale blue like his own, and seemed to look directly into his soul. Something broke open inside him, something that had been walled off for decades, since his own childhood, in a home where emotions were considered weaknesses and connections liabilities. A tear slipped down his cheek, landing softly on his daughter's blanket. "Hello," he whispered, voice thick with emotion he didn't try to disguise. "I'm your father." The words, spoken aloud for the first time, resonated through him like a vow. For the next 12 hours, Mitchell maintained his vigil outside Lottie's room, allowing the nurses to bring the twins to him periodically while Lottie slept. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't even check his phone despite the dozens of messages from his executive team. His world had contracted to this hospital floor, to the 3 people behind that door. When a nurse finally emerged to tell him Lottie was awake and asking for the babies, Mitchell rose stiffly, his body protesting the hours of immobility. "Does she know I'm still here?" he asked. The nurse nodded. "She does." Mitchell hesitated outside the door to Lottie's room, gathering his composure before entering. She was sitting up in bed, looking simultaneously exhausted and alert, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The twins lay in a clear bassinet beside her, both sleeping peacefully. "Lottie," he greeted her softly. She regarded him with an unreadable expression. "You stayed?" "Of course I stayed. For 12 hours? I would have stayed longer if necessary." Lottie's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? The question was simple but profound. Why had he stayed? Not for appearance's sake. No press knew he was here. Not for legal leverage. He had attorneys for that. Not even for the abstract concept of legacy that had driven so many of his life choices. "Because they're my daughters," he finally answered, "and because you needed someone." Lottie's expression softened fractionally. "I would have managed." "You shouldn't have to manage everything alone, Lottie, especially not this." She looked away, focusing on the sleeping infants. "Have you held them?" "Yes. The nurses showed me how." "And?" Mitchell moved closer to the bassinet, gazing down at his daughters. "And I've never felt anything like it," he admitted. "They're miraculous." For a moment, something like understanding passed between them, a shared awe at what they had created, however unintentionally. "Please," Mitchell said quietly, "let me hold them again." Lottie watched him for a long moment before nodding once. "You can hold them," she said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion, "but you will never be part of our lives." The permission coupled with exclusion struck Mitchell like a physical blow. He sank to his knees beside her bed, an unconscious gesture of supplication that would have been unthinkable to the man he'd been a year ago. "Lottie," he whispered, his hand tentatively touching hers, "I regret everything I said that night. I was a fool, an arrogant, cruel fool who didn't see your worth. Please don't punish our daughters for my mistakes." Surprise flickered across her face at his humility, but her resolve remained firm. "This isn't punishment, Mitchell. It's protection. I won't expose them to a father who might view them as I once viewed their mother, as commodities, as status symbols, as things to be controlled. I'm not that man anymore," Mitchell insisted, his voice breaking slightly. "That man died when his world collapsed, when he realized too late what matters." Lottie's expression remained skeptical, but something in his raw honesty must have reached her. She lifted one of the twins from the bassinet and held her out to him. "Start with this moment," she said quietly. "Just this one moment with her. We'll figure out the rest later." Mitchell took his daughter with reverent care, cradling her against his chest as if she were made of the finest crystal. As he looked down at her sleeping face, he made a silent vow that no matter what it took, no matter how long, he would prove to Lottie that he was worthy of being in their lives, not as the man he had been, but as the man these tiny girls needed him to become. Chapter 5. The Fortress Wall. The first month after the twins' birth passed in a sleepless haze for Lottie. Days and nights blurred together in an endless cycle of feeding, changing, soothing, and brief, precious moments of rest. She had named the girls Maya and Zora, after Maya Angelou and Zora Neale Hurston, women whose words had sustained her through her darkest times. Mitchell had arranged for a private nurse to assist during the first 2 weeks, ignoring Lottie's protests that she didn't need his help. When the nurse's term ended, Lottie found herself simultaneously relieved to reclaim her privacy and overwhelmed by the reality of caring for 2 infants alone. She had moved into a new apartment before the birth, a modest but secure 2-bedroom in a better neighborhood than she could normally afford. She told herself the decision was practical, not influenced by Mitchell's persistent argument that her previous place was unsafe for children. The fact that he had somehow discovered her new address less than 24 hours after she moved in was both impressive and unsettling. He appeared every day at precisely 6 p.m., bearing food from different high-end restaurants and asking in a carefully neutral tone if he could see the twins. Lottie established rigid boundaries, 30 minutes, supervised, in the living room only. Mitchell accepted these terms without complaint, arriving punctually and departing exactly when his allotted time ended. On this particular evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Lottie opened her door to find Mitchell soaked from the short walk from car to building, a large paper bag clutched protectively against his chest. "Ethiopian tonight," he said, offering the bag. "The restaurant owner assured me it travels well." Lottie accepted it with a nod of thanks. Their interactions had developed a strained but functional civility over the weeks, neither friendly nor overtly hostile, just cautiously navigating the complex reality of their situation. "The girls are sleeping," she told him, moving toward the kitchen to unpack the food. "They might wake up during your visit, or they might not." Disappointment flickered across Mitchell's face before he masked it with practiced ease. "I understand." He followed her to the kitchen, maintaining a respectful distance as she transferred fragrant stews and soft injera bread onto plates. Mitchell had quickly learned that Lottie preferred ethnic cuisines, a stark contrast to the bland, expensive fare he normally consumed at business dinners. "How are you feeling?" he asked, the question carefully casual. "Tired," Lottie answered honestly, "but managing. The night nurse offer still stands." "And my answer remains the same." She handed him a plate. "I don't need your money, Mitchell." He accepted the food without argument, though she could see the frustration he carefully contained. They ate in silence at her small dining table, the only sounds the rain against the windows and the occasional soft noise from the twins' monitor. Mitchell finished quickly. He always did, as if eating were merely a necessary biological function rather than something to enjoy. Setting his fork down, he asked, "Have you thought more about the trust fund?" Lottie sighed. "We've discussed this. I don't want your money." "It's not my money," Mitchell countered. "It would be theirs, for education, healthcare, opportunities I never had growing up." The reference to his childhood, something he rarely mentioned, caught Lottie's attention. "What opportunities didn't you have?" Mitchell hesitated, unaccustomed to personal disclosure. "Security," he finally said. "The knowledge that illness or accident or job loss wouldn't mean homelessness. My father lost everything when I was 14. His business, our home, his pride. He never recovered." Lottie studied him, seeing glimpses of the wounded boy beneath the powerful man. "Is that why you built your empire? For security?" "Initially," he admitted. "Later it became about proving something, to him, to everyone who'd written us off. Eventually it was just about power itself." His expression darkened. "A hollow pursuit, as it turns out." Before Lottie could respond, a sharp cry emanated from the baby monitor, quickly joined by a second. The twins' synchronized crying had become a predictable pattern. When one started, the other inevitably followed within seconds. "I should," Lottie began, rising from her chair. "Let me," Mitchell said, already standing. "Please, you can finish eating." After a moment's hesitation, Lottie nodded. She watched on the monitor as Mitchell entered the nursery, moving with surprising confidence for a man who'd never held an infant before the twins' birth. He lifted Maya first. He could now distinguish them instantly, something that had taken Lottie herself several days to master, murmuring softly as he checked her diaper. "Just hungry, aren't you?" he said, his voice gentler than Lottie had ever heard it. He placed Maya back in her crib momentarily to pick up Zora, performing the same assessment before returning to the living room with both infants cradled expertly in his arms. "Feeding time," he announced unnecessarily. Lottie took them, settling into the nursing chair Mitchell had delivered, despite her protests that she'd already purchased one. She had to admit his selection was superior, ergonomically designed with lumbar support that eased her still healing body. Mitchell turned away discreetly as she prepared to nurse, his respect for her privacy another change from the man who had once regarded her body as a purchased commodity. Only when the twins were latched and nursing contentedly did he face her again, his expression softening as he observed the tableau. "They're thriving," he said quietly. "You're an excellent mother, Lottie." The unexpected compliment caught her off guard. "Thank you," she replied, surprised to find she valued his assessment. Mitchell checked his watch. "My time is almost up. I should go." The rigid adherence to her boundaries, which had initially reassured Lottie, now struck her as somewhat absurd given the intimacy of their current circumstances. "You can stay until they finish eating," she offered, "if you want." Relief washed over his features. "I'd like that." He settled into the chair opposite hers, content to simply observe his daughters. In these quiet moments, with the rain creating a gentle soundtrack and the twins nursing peacefully, Lottie could almost forget the circumstances that had brought them to this point, could almost see Mitchell as simply another new parent, navigating the profound transformation of bringing life into the world. Almost. "I meant what I said," Mitchell broke the comfortable silence, "about wanting to be part of their lives. Not just these supervised visits, but really involved. I want to know them, Lottie, and I want them to know me. Not as the man I was, but as the father I'm trying to become." Lottie shifted the twins slightly, buying time as she considered her response. "I believe you want that," she finally said, "but wanting doesn't make it right. These girls deserve stability, consistency. Your life has been neither." "I'm changing that," he insisted. "I've stepped back from day-to-day operations at Santner Tech. I've sold the penthouse and bought a house, a real home, 10 minutes from here. I'm seeing a therapist twice weekly to address he hesitated, my issues with control and emotional disconnection." Surprise flickered across Lottie's face. Mitchell Santner, seeing a therapist. The idea would have been laughable 6 months ago. "That's commendable," she acknowledged, "but it doesn't erase our history." "No," Mitchell agreed softly. "Nothing can do that. I can only try to write a different future." As if sensing the weight of the conversation, Zora detached and began to fuss. Mitchell rose immediately, holding out his arms in silent question. Lottie nodded, allowing him to take the baby while she continued nursing Maya. With practiced ease, Mitchell positioned Zora against his shoulder, patting her back gently until she produced a surprisingly loud burp. The sound startled a laugh from Lottie. "She gets that from your side," she joked, the first genuine moment of levity they'd shared. Mitchell's smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines of ambition and strain into something younger, more authentic. Clearly, Grace women would never be so unrefined. For a fleeting moment, they were just two parents sharing the simple joy of their child's bodily functions, a universal experience that transcended their complicated history. The moment faded as Maya finished nursing. Lottie adjusted her clothing and took both twins, rising to return them to their cribs. Mitchell followed at a respectful distance, lingering in the nursery doorway. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, the question both a confirmation and a request. Lottie nodded, laying the already drowsing infants in their cribs. "Same time?" As Mitchell turned to leave, a thought occurred to her. "Mitchell," she called softly, "thank you for the food. It was perfect." His smile was smaller this time, but somehow more genuine. "I pay attention," he said simply, and then he was gone, the apartment door closing with a gentle click behind him. Lottie stood in the sudden silence, processing the subtle shift in their dynamic. The fortress walls she had built around herself and the twins remained intact. But perhaps, just perhaps, she had opened a small window to allow in fresh air. For 27 consecutive days, Mitchell appeared at exactly 6 p.m., never a minute early or late. On the 28th day at 6:15, Lottie found herself checking her phone with a frown. By 6:30, concern had replaced irritation. Mitchell's punctuality was pathologically consistent. Something was wrong. At 6:47, her phone rang, an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Grace?" a professional female voice asked. "This is Mercy Hospital. You're listed as Mitchell Santner's emergency contact." Lottie's heart stuttered. What happened? "Mr. Santner was involved in a minor car accident. He's stable but sedated for pain. He was quite adamant that we inform you he won't make it for—" The woman hesitated. "For his appointment tonight." Relief flooded through Lottie. Is he seriously injured? Broken ribs, mild concussion. We're keeping him overnight for observation. After getting the hospital details, Lottie hung up, emotions warring within her. Mitchell had made her his emergency contact, a fact that should have irritated her but instead provoked an unexpected warmth. He'd been injured, yet his primary concern had been letting her know he wouldn't make their scheduled visit. The man was infuriating in his persistence. 2 hours later, with the twins fed and settled for their longest sleep stretch, Lottie made an impulsive decision. She called Alina, who arrived within 30 minutes to babysit, and took an Uber to Mercy Hospital. Mitchell's private room was dimly lit, monitors beeping softly as he slept, his normally impeccable appearance marred by a gash across his forehead and the unnatural pallor of pain. Lottie hesitated in the doorway, suddenly uncertain of her decision to come. As if sensing her presence, Mitchell's eyes opened, confusion giving way to surprise when he registered her presence. "Lottie!" His voice was raspy, disbelieving. "The twins are fine," she assured him, stepping into the room. "Elena's with them. I wanted to see if you were all right." Mitchell attempted to sit up, wincing visibly at the movement. "You came to check on me?" "Don't read too much into it," Lottie warned, but her tone lacked conviction. She approached the bed, assessing his injuries with clinical detachment. "You look terrible." "You should see the other guy," Mitchell joked weakly. At her raised eyebrow, he clarified, "Delivery truck ran a red light. My driver swerved to avoid the worst of it." "Your driver?" "I don't drive myself anymore," Mitchell admitted. "Too many distractions. I was thinking about the twins, actually, whether Zora's cough had improved." The revelation that he had been thinking of their daughter with such concern softened something in Lottie's expression. "It has. The pediatrician said it's nothing serious." Relief washed over Mitchell's features. "Good. That's good." An awkward silence fell between them, the first in weeks. Lottie perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, suddenly hyper-aware that this was the first time they'd been alone together in a location that wasn't her apartment since the night the twins were conceived. "You made me your emergency contact," she finally said. Mitchell had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "There's no one else I would trust," he admitted. "Not anymore." The simple honesty of his response resonated with Lottie in unexpected ways. Mitchell Santner, who once commanded an empire, had no one but her to call in crisis. The realization humanized him further in her eyes. "How long will they keep you?" she asked. "Just overnight. I'll be discharged tomorrow morning." Lottie nodded. Decision made. "I'll have Alina bring the twins by your place tomorrow evening. You shouldn't be driving or carrying them with broken ribs, but you can still see them." Mitchell's expression brightened despite his pain. "You do that?" "Don't make me regret it," she warned, but there was no real threat in her voice. As she rose to leave, Mitchell's hand caught hers, the first voluntary physical contact between them since the twins' birth. "Thank you," he said simply, his eyes conveying more than his words. Lottie didn't pull away immediately, allowing the brief connection. "Rest," she instructed. "The girls expect you back in form soon." Only as she left the hospital did Lottie acknowledge to herself that the first crack had formed in her carefully constructed defenses. Mitchell's consistent presence, his genuine efforts to respect her boundaries while remaining steadfast in his commitment to the twins, had begun to erode her resistance. The fortress walls still stood, but now, perhaps, with the foundation of a bridge being built alongside them. Chapter 6. Vicious Vengeance. 3 months after the twins' birth, as April's sunshine warmed San Francisco's notoriously foggy atmosphere, Lottie found herself sitting on a park bench beside Mitchell, watching as he cradled both sleeping infants against his chest. Their co-parenting arrangement had evolved gradually from rigid supervised visits to more natural interactions. Today marked the first time she had allowed him to take the twins to the park alone, though she had, coincidentally, appeared 30 minutes into his outing. Mitchell had simply smiled knowingly and shifted to make room for her on the bench, not commenting on her transparent excuse to check on them. His acceptance of her protectiveness, without challenging or resenting it, was yet another indication of his ongoing transformation. "They sleep better outdoors," he observed, his voice soft to avoid disturbing the peaceful babies. "Something about the fresh air." Lottie nodded, taking in the serene picture they presented. Mitchell had abandoned his formal business attire when with the twins, today wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater that softened his normally imposing presence. With his attention fully focused on the infants nestled against him, he looked nothing like the cold, calculating man who had once dismissed her so cruelly. "You're good with them," she admitted, the words feeling like a significant concession. Mitchell's smile was gentle, his eyes never leaving the twins' faces. "They make it easy. They're extraordinary, Lottie." "They are," she agreed, a mother's pride evident in her voice. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sounds of children playing and birds calling. These moments of peace had become more frequent recently, moments when their shared connection to the twins temporarily bridged the gulf of their past. "I have a proposal," Mitchell said suddenly, his tone cautious. "A business proposal," he clarified when she tensed slightly. "I'm listening." "The restaurant where you were working, Eloise, it's for sale." Lottie frowned, confused by the seeming non sequitur. "And I thought you might want to buy it." She laughed, the sound sharp with disbelief. "Right, with all my spare millions." "With a small business loan," Mitchell corrected, "for which I would act as guarantor only. No money would come directly from me." Lottie stared at him, processing the unexpected suggestion. "Why would I want to own a restaurant? I was a waitress there, not a chef or manager." "You were studying business law before?" He hesitated. "Before everything happened. You understand contracts, regulations. The current manager would stay on. You'd be the owner, making strategic decisions." His eyes met hers directly. "You told me once you wanted financial independence. This would provide that." The thoughtfulness of the proposal caught Lottie off guard. Mitchell had clearly considered her desire for autonomy, offering an opportunity that would allow her to build something of her own without direct dependence on him. "I'll think about it," she said, finally, unable to find a reason to reject the idea outright. Mitchell nodded, accepting her response without pushing further, another change from the man who once would have demanded immediate agreement to his plans. The moment was shattered by the intrusive sound of a camera shutter. Both turned to see a man with a professional-grade lens quickly retreating across the park. "Paparazzi," Mitchell explained, his expression darkening. "They've mostly lost interest, but occasionally they still try for family photos." Lottie instinctively moved to shield the twins, though they remained peacefully asleep. "Will it ever stop? The public interest?" "Eventually," Mitchell assured her. "The news cycle moves on. Some tech billionaire will have a more scandalous breakdown, and will be yesterday's story." His attempt at levity fell flat as worry creased Lottie's brow. "I don't want the girls exposed to this," she said firmly. They didn't ask for public scrutiny. I know, Mitchell agreed, his voice softening. I've instructed my legal team to aggressively pursue any publication that prints images of them. Most outlets respect that boundary. As if sensing the tension in their parents, Zora stirred against Mitchell's chest, her tiny face scrunching in preparation for a cry. He shifted her gently, patting her back with practiced ease until she settled again. We should go, Lottie suggested, glancing around the park with newfound unease. It's almost feeding time anyway. They gathered their things and headed toward Mitchell's car, a modest SUV that had replaced his collection of sports cars, yet another concession to his new role as father. The practicality of the vehicle, with its carefully installed car seats and diaper bag in the trunk, represented the fundamental shift in his priorities. I can drop you both at home, he offered as they approached the vehicle. That would be good, Lottie agreed, helping transfer the twins to their car seats with the synchronized efficiency they'd developed over recent weeks. As they drove through San Francisco's hilly streets, Mitchell glanced at Lottie in the passenger seat. There's something else we should discuss, he said, his tone careful. About security? Lottie tensed slightly. What about it? I've received some concerning communications recently. Nothing specific, just vague expressions of discontent about my betrayal of my ex-wife. Threatening communications? Mitchell hesitated. My security team doesn't consider them credible threats, but they've advised increased caution, especially regarding the twins. Alarm flickered across Lottie's face. You think Victoria might... No, Mitchell interrupted firmly. Victoria has many faults, but she wouldn't harm children. This is likely just an overzealous supporter of hers, upset about our divorce. Then why mention it? Mitchell's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Because it might be prudent to consider additional security measures for your apartment. Nothing intrusive, just upgraded locks, a better security system, perhaps occasional patrols. Lottie studied his profile, looking for signs of manipulation, the old Mitchell using fear to control her. Instead, she saw only genuine concern for their daughter's safety. All right, she conceded, but I approve any changes first, and no live-in security personnel. Agreed, Mitchell said, relief evident in his voice. As they pulled up to Lottie's building, Mitchell's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. The caller ID displayed Victoria, causing both to freeze momentarily. Speak of the devil, Lottie muttered. Mitchell declined the call with a sharp tap. Whatever she wants can wait. But as they were removing the twins from their car seats, his phone rang again, insistently, repeatedly. After the fourth call in succession, Mitchell sighed. She's nothing if not persistent. Let me take this quickly and see what she wants. He stepped away from the car, phone pressed to his ear. Lottie couldn't hear his words, but his posture grew increasingly rigid as the conversation progressed, his free hand clenching at his side. When he returned, his expression was carefully controlled, but tension radiated from him. What is it? Lottie asked, Maya secured against her chest in the baby carrier. Victoria has been approached by a documentary filmmaker, Mitchell explained, his voice tight. They're doing a piece on wealthy men and their secret families. She's considering participating. Lottie inhaled sharply. She wouldn't. She would, Mitchell countered grimly, unless her demands are met. What demands? Renegotiation of our divorce settlement. Again, his jaw tightened. She's using the twins as leverage. Fury flashed in Lottie's eyes. She has no right to involve our daughters. No, she doesn't, Mitchell agreed, his tone hardening with resolve. And I won't allow it. What are you going to do? Mitchell carefully settled Zora into her carrier, securing it to his chest before meeting Lottie's gaze. Whatever is necessary to protect our family. The determination in his voice, the instinctive inclusion of Lottie in his definition of family, the protective steel in his expression, All spoke to how profoundly Mitchell had changed from the man who had once viewed relationships as transactional conveniences. "We'll handle it together," Lottie found herself saying, surprising both of them with the solidarity implied in her words. Mitchell's eyes softened momentarily. "Together," he echoed, the word carrying weight beyond its simple meaning. As they entered Lottie's building, the doorman greeted them with a familiarity that reflected Mitchell's regular presence. Inside the elevator, standing side by side with their daughters secured against their chests, they presented a united front. Co-parents aligned against external threats, their complicated past temporarily set aside in service of a shared purpose. "She won't stop with this," Mitchell said quietly as the elevator ascended. "Victoria has always been calculated in her attacks. This is just the opening move." "Then we'll be ready," Lottie replied with the same strength that had first captured Mitchell's attention. "The twins deserve better than to be pawns in her game." When the elevator doors opened on Lottie's floor, they found an elegantly wrapped package leaning against her apartment door. No card, no delivery notice, just an expensive-looking box tied with a silver ribbon. Mitchell immediately stepped in front of Lottie and the twins. "Don't touch it." He approached cautiously, examining the package without touching it. "Did you order something?" "No," Lottie replied, tension evident in her voice. Mitchell pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. "Martin, I need the security team at Lottie's apartment immediately. There's an unidentified package." He listened for a moment. "Yes, we'll wait downstairs. 10 minutes." He turned to Lottie, his expression grave. "We should go back down. Security will check the package." "You think it could be dangerous?" Fear crept into her voice as she instinctively tightened her hold on Maya. "I think we can't be too careful," Mitchell replied, already guiding her back toward the elevator. "Not when it comes to the twins." As they descended to the lobby, Lottie found herself leaning slightly into Mitchell's solid presence beside her. Despite their complicated history, despite all the reasons she had to doubt him, in this moment she was grateful for his protective instincts, his resources, his unwavering focus on their daughter's safety. The security team arrived with impressive speed, two discreet professionals who greeted Mitchell with respectful nods before heading up to examine the package. 20 tense minutes later, they returned to the lobby. "It's clear, sir," the lead security officer reported. "No explosives, no chemical agents. Contents appear to be baby clothes." Relief washed over both parents, followed quickly by renewed confusion. "Baby clothes," Lottie repeated. "From whom?" The security officer handed Mitchell a small card they had found inside. "This was enclosed." Mitchell read the card, his expression darkening before he wordlessly passed it to Lottie. In elegant script, it read simply, "For my stepdaughters. May they inherit their father's cunning rather than their mother's naivety. Victoria." The calculated malice of the gesture, delivering an ostensibly innocent gift laden with threatening implications, was quintessentially Victoria. It wasn't just the message that disturbed Lottie, but the violation implied by the knowledge of her home address, the twins' existence acknowledged as pawns in Victoria's vendetta. "She's been to the apartment," Lottie realized aloud, a chill running through her. "She knows where we live." Mitchell's expression hardened into something Lottie hadn't seen since their early encounters, the ruthless businessman capable of destroying opponents without remorse. But this time, that cold determination was focused on protecting rather than acquiring. "You and the twins aren't staying here tonight," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "My house has a state-of-the-art security system, multiple bedrooms, and is unknown to Victoria." Under normal circumstances, Lottie might have bristled at his authoritative tone, asserted her independence, insisted on finding her own solution. But with Maya warm against her chest and Victoria's thinly veiled threat in her hand, safety took precedence over pride. We'll need the cribs, their special blankets, my breast pump. I'll have everything delivered, Mitchell assured her, already typing instructions to his staff. The essentials tonight, everything else tomorrow. As they left the building under the watchful eyes of Mitchell's security team, Lottie realized they had crossed another threshold in their complex relationship. Victoria's vindictive actions had inadvertently accelerated their transition from cautious co-parents to something closer to a unified family. The irony wasn't lost on Lottie. The woman who had tried to separate them through manipulation and fear had instead pushed them closer together, creating an alliance strengthened by shared concern for their daughters. In the car, as Mitchell drove them toward his home with heightened vigilance, Lottie glanced at the twins sleeping peacefully in their car seats, unaware of the adult dramas swirling around them. Their innocent vulnerability reinforced her determination to protect them from Victoria's toxic influence, even if that meant accepting Mitchell's protection as well. "We'll handle this," Mitchell said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Victoria has always underestimated one crucial factor." "What's that?" Lottie asked. Mitchell's eyes met hers briefly before returning to the road. "She's never faced me when I'm protecting something I genuinely care about." His voice softened as he added, "Someone I care about." The simple admission hung between them, not quite a declaration, but more than a casual comment. Another step in their gradual journey from enemies to allies, from reluctant co-parents to something with the potential to be much more. As they arrived at Mitchell's house, a surprisingly modest but elegant home in a secure neighborhood, Lottie found herself wondering if Victoria's vicious vendetta might ultimately lead to an outcome none of them had anticipated: the forging of a real family from the ashes of betrayal and mistrust. Chapter 7. Brutal Truths. Victoria Sandner had always prided herself on perfect timing. It was a skill she'd cultivated since childhood, knowing precisely when to make an entrance, when to reveal a secret, when to strike for maximum impact. So when photographs of her ex-husband with his black mistress and their mixed-race twins appeared in a minor gossip blog, Victoria recognized her moment had arrived. She had been watching Mitchell's careful rehabilitation from afar. The divorce settlement had been generous but unsatisfying. Half his fortune meant little compared to the humiliation she'd endured, discovering not just his infidelity, but the systematic way he'd compartmentalized her, treating their marriage as a business arrangement while seeking physical satisfaction elsewhere. Victoria wanted more than money. She wanted annihilation. On a pristine June morning, she arrived at Lottie's apartment building in a chauffeur-driven Bentley, her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, her slender frame draped in a Chanel suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The doorman, impressed by her appearance and authoritative manner, directed her to Lottie's unit without question. Lottie answered the door with Maya on her hip, momentarily stunned by the unexpected visitor. She recognized Victoria immediately from media coverage of the divorce. Mitchell's elegant Nordic ex-wife was unmistakable. "Miss Grace," Victoria said, her cultured voice pleasant despite the glacial assessment in her blue eyes. "May I come in?" "I believe we have matters to discuss." Lottie hesitated, instinct warning her against allowing this woman into her home. But curiosity prevailed. "Briefly," she agreed, stepping aside. "I have an appointment soon." Victoria glided into the apartment, taking in the modest but tasteful furnishings with a slight arch of her perfectly shaped eyebrows. Her gaze lingered on Maya, who stared back with Mitchell's pale blue eyes, a genetic confirmation that seemed to harden something in the visitor's expression. "I won't waste time with pleasantries," Victoria said, declining to sit when Lottie gestured toward the sofa. "I've come to show you something I believe you should see." From her designer handbag, she withdrew a cream-colored envelope, offering it with manicured fingers. "I thought you should know what kind of man is around your daughters." Lottie shifted Maya to her other hip. reluctantly accepting the envelope. Inside were photographs, recent ones, of Mitchell with a visibly pregnant woman. They showed him with his hand on her stomach, leaning close to speak in her ear, helping her into an expensive car. The intimacy was unmistakable. "These were taken last week," Victoria said quietly. "I have a friend who works at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Mitchell has been attending LeMay's classes there with this woman for months." Blood rushed in Lottie's ears, a roaring that nearly drowned out Victoria's next words. "There are others, of course. Mitchell has always had a particular pattern. Women in financial distress, women he can rescue and control." Her perfect lips curved in a smile devoid of warmth. "You weren't the first, Ms. Grace, and clearly, you weren't the last." Lottie stared at the photos, something cold and heavy settling in her chest. The pregnant woman was beautiful, with coffee-colored skin and delicate features that bore a striking resemblance to Lottie's own. The similarity was undeniable and damning. "Why show me this?" Lottie asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Victoria's expression shifted to one of practiced sympathy. "Woman to woman, I felt you deserved to know. Mitchell presents himself as a changed man, devoted to your children. But some men never change their essential nature." She glanced meaningfully at Maya. "I wouldn't want your daughters growing attached to a father who will inevitably disappoint them, as he disappoints all women eventually." With perfect timing, Zora began crying from the nursery. Victoria took the opportunity to move toward the door. "I'll let myself out. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, but I believe in women supporting women, even in difficult circumstances." After she left, Lottie placed the photographs on the kitchen counter and went to tend to Zora, moving through the motions of changing and comforting her daughter with mechanical precision while her mind raced. Mitchell was due for his daily visit in 3 hours. 3 hours for Lottie to process this revelation, to decide how to confront him. 3 hours to manage the bitter disappointment crushing her chest. She had been starting to trust him. Worse, she had been starting to believe in his transformation, to see genuine care in his interactions with the twins, to recognize real effort in his attempts to respect her boundaries while remaining present in their lives. All an illusion, apparently. Another calculated performance from a man who viewed relationships as transactions and women as interchangeable commodities. When Mitchell arrived exactly on schedule, he found the apartment door locked. His gentle knock went unanswered. After a moment of confusion, he tried calling Lottie's phone, only to discover he'd been blocked. "Lottie?" he called through the door, concern evident in his voice. "Are the girls all right?" After a tense silence, her voice came back cold and distant. "The girls are fine. Go away, Mitchell." "What's happened?" he asked, genuinely baffled. "Please let me in so we can talk." "There's nothing to discuss. I know everything." Mitchell leaned his forehead against the door, mind racing. "Know what?" "Lottie, I don't understand." The door abruptly opened, revealing Lottie with both twins in a double stroller, her expression a mask of controlled fury. "I'm taking the girls to the pediatrician. When we return, I expect you to be gone." Before he could respond, she thrust the envelope of photographs into his chest. "Your latest project sends her regards," she said, her voice tight with hurt, disguised as anger. "Or was it Victoria? Hard to keep track of all the women in your life, I imagine." Understanding dawned as Mitchell glanced at the photos. "Lottie, this isn't what it looks like." "It never is," she interrupted. "Please move. We're going to be late." "This woman is my sister," Mitchell said urgently, blocking her path. "My half-sister, Sophia. We've only recently reconnected. Our father—" "Save it," Lottie snapped. "She looks nothing like you, and she looks everything like me, which seems to be your preferred type. The resemblance between us is obvious." "Yes, because she's half black like you," Mitchell insisted. My father had an affair with her mother years before I was born. I only found out about her existence after the divorce, when she contacted me." His eyes pleaded for understanding. "Sophia has no family, Lottie. Her mother died last year. She's alone and pregnant and scared. I've been helping her, that's all." The explanation was so unexpected, so specific in its details, that Lottie hesitated. "You expect me to believe you suddenly discovered a secret half-sister who happens to look like me and happens to be pregnant?" "I know how it sounds," Mitchell acknowledged, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "But it's the truth. Call her yourself." He pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly to a contact. "Ask her anything. She'll confirm everything." Doubt crept into Lottie's certainty, but Victoria's poisonous words still echoed in her mind. Even if that's true, Victoria said there were others. Other women you've helped the same way you helped me. Mitchell's expression darkened. "Victoria visited you this morning, and you believed her after everything we've built these past months." The genuine hurt in his voice gave Lottie pause. "The photographs are deliberately misleading," Mitchell finished. "Victoria has been trying to renegotiate our divorce settlement. When I refused, she threatened to remind me what it feels like to lose everything." He gestured to the stroller. "You and the girls are everything to me now, Lottie. Victoria knows that." Lottie wanted to believe him. The steady presence he'd maintained since the twins' birth, the consistent respect he'd shown for her boundaries, the genuine joy he exhibited with their daughters, all argued for his sincerity. But the seed of doubt Victoria had planted had found fertile ground in Lottie's lingering insecurities. "I need time," she finally said. "I need to think." Mitchell stepped back, allowing her to pass with the stroller. "I understand, but please, before you make any decisions, talk to Sophia. Let her tell you herself." Lottie nodded once, in minimal acknowledgement, before heading toward the elevator. Mitchell watched her go, hands clenched at his sides, the photographs crumpled in his fist. The pediatrician appointment provided no distraction from the turmoil in Lottie's mind. The twins received routine vaccinations, cried at the momentary pain, then settled back into their usual contented state, unaware of the adult drama swirling around them. Dr. Ramos pronounced them perfectly healthy, growing exactly as they should. "They have their father's eyes," he observed casually, unaware of the emotional impact of his words. "But they're definitely their mother's daughters in temperament, strong-willed little ladies." Lottie managed a tight smile, thanking him before bundling the twins back into their stroller. Outside the medical building, she checked her phone, finding a text message from Mitchell. "Sophia's contact info attached. Please call her. After that, if you still want me gone from your lives, I'll respect your decision. But please, give me a chance to prove Victoria's claims false." The sincerity of the message, coupled with his willingness to step back if she requested it, gave Lottie pause. The Mitchell Santner she had first met would never have offered to respect her decision if it contradicted his desires. He would have demanded, manipulated, leveraged his power to get his way. This willingness to accept her judgment, even if it meant losing his daughters, spoke to a fundamental change in him. After putting the twins down for their nap, Lottie stared at Sophia's contact information for long minutes before finally making the call. The woman who answered had a warm voice with a slight southern accent, nothing like Mitchell's crisp diction. "Hello?" she said, sounding cautiously curious about the unknown number. "This is Lottie Grace," Lottie began, then hesitated, unsure how to continue. "I'm Mitchell's Lottie," Sophia finished, her voice warming further. "I've been hoping to meet you. Mitchell talks about you and the twins constantly." The genuine pleasure in her voice caught Lottie off guard. "He does?" "Lord, yes. The man is completely smitten with those babies. Shows me pictures every time we meet, like I haven't seen 50 nearly identical ones the week before." Sophia laughed softly. But I'm guessing you didn't call for that. You want to know if I'm really his sister? I'm sorry, it's just... No need to apologize, Sophia interrupted gently. I'd be suspicious too. The timing is admittedly convenient, and heaven knows Mitchell wasn't always the most straightforward man. Over the next 30 minutes, Sophia shared her story. How she'd tracked down their father 5 years ago, only to discover he had died. How she had debated contacting Mitchell for years, finally reaching out after seeing news of his divorce. How his initial skepticism had given way to DNA testing that confirmed their relationship. How he had become her only family support during an unplanned pregnancy after her boyfriend abandoned her. He's been a better brother than I had any right to expect, Sophia concluded, especially given how I appeared in his life. Something eased in Lottie's chest. The woman's account rang with authenticity, details too specific to be fabricated, emotions too genuine to be performed. Thank you, Lottie said quietly. I appreciate your candor. Mitchell loves those little girls, Sophia said earnestly. And from how he talks about you, the respect in his voice, the way he blames himself entirely for your initial situation, I think he might love their mother too, though he'd be the last to admit it. The suggestion sent an unexpected warmth through Lottie. We have a complicated history. Don't we all? Sophia replied with a chuckle. But speaking as someone who only met her brother as an adult, life's too short for barriers that don't need to exist. Those girls deserve to know their father, especially when he's trying so damn hard to be worthy of them. After ending the call, Lottie sat in contemplative silence, processing everything she'd learned. Sophia's story aligned with Mitchell's explanation, dismantling Victoria's calculated insinuations. The realization that she had been manipulated, that she had allowed Mitchell's ex-wife to plant doubts about a man who had done nothing but prove his commitment for months, filled Lottie with a complicated mixture of relief and chagrin. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell. No pressure, just letting you know I'm here if you want to talk. The respect inherent in that message, the space it gave her to process at her own pace, solidified her decision. She typed a simple reply. Come over at 6 as usual. The girls miss you. When Mitchell arrived that evening, precisely on time as always, the hesitation in his normally confident posture was visible. He entered cautiously, eyes searching Lottie's face for clues to her emotional state. I spoke with Sophia, she said without preamble. She confirmed everything. Relief washed over his features. Thank you for giving me the chance to explain. I should have trusted you more, Lottie admitted. After these past months, you deserved that much. Mitchell stepped closer, his expression serious. Victoria is skilled at finding vulnerabilities. In our marriage, in business deals, in people. It's what made her so effective as a corporate spouse. She certainly found mine, Lottie acknowledged. My fear that I was just another in a pattern, that the twins and I meant nothing special. You could never be just another anything, Lottie Grace, Mitchell said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. You're the woman who brought me to my knees and showed me the emptiness of everything I thought mattered. You're the mother of my children. He trailed off, seemingly unable to find adequate words. I'm what? Lottie prompted softly. Mitchell's eyes met hers directly, vulnerability evident in their pale blue depths. You're the standard by which I now measure myself. Every day I ask if I'm becoming someone worthy of being in your life, in our daughters' lives. The raw honesty of his admission touched something deep within Lottie. This man before her, humbled by love for his children and respect for their mother, bore little resemblance to the arrogant billionaire who had once dismissed her so cruelly. Victoria won't stop, she warned, changing the subject slightly to mask her emotional response. If she's trying to renegotiate the divorce settlement, she'll find other ways to pressure you. Let her try, Mitchell said. a hint of his old steel returning. "I won't let her harm our family again." Our family. The phrase hung between them, neither acknowledging its significance directly, but both feeling its weight. "The twins are napping," Lottie said. "They should wake up soon. Would you like some coffee while we wait?" It was a small olive branch, but Mitchell recognized it for the significant gesture it was, an invitation to stay beyond his designated visiting time, to move from rigid boundaries towards something more fluid and natural. "I'd like that very much," he replied, following her to the kitchen. As Lottie prepared the coffee, she glanced sideways at Mitchell, taking in the cautious hope in his expression. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of a future where he was more than just the twins' father, where he might eventually become something to her as well. Not yet. Perhaps not for a long time, but for the first time since that night in his hotel room, the door to that possibility stood slightly ajar. Chapter 8. Surrender. Mitchell Santner had faced countless adversaries in his rise to wealth and power. Hostile takeovers, federal regulators, industry rivals, even his own board of directors during particularly contentious strategic decisions. He had navigated each challenge with calculated precision, marshaling resources, leveraging advantages, and ultimately emerging victorious. But Victoria's attack on his fragile connection with Lottie and the twins had shaken him more deeply than any previous battle. The realization that his past could still threaten his present, that the man he had been might destroy the man he was trying to become, drove him to take decisive action. 3 weeks after Victoria's visit to Lottie, Mitchell sat across from his ex-wife in the private dining room of an exclusive restaurant, watching her sip champagne with practiced elegance. "I was surprised to hear from you," Victoria admitted, setting down her flute, "especially after my little chat with your baby mama." She smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "Such a quaint term, isn't it?" Mitchell maintained his composure, years of high-stakes negotiations having taught him the power of emotional control. "I wanted to discuss your recent actions directly." "You mean my friendly warning to Ms. Grace?" Victoria's perfectly manicured finger traced the rim of her glass. "I was simply being transparent, something you never managed during our marriage. You deliberately misrepresented my relationship with Sophia to create doubt and discord," Mitchell corrected, his voice level despite the anger simmering beneath. "You manipulated photographs to suggest an inappropriate relationship." Victoria shrugged one elegant shoulder. "I merely presented facts and allowed Miss Grace to draw her own conclusions. Not my fault if those conclusions reflected poorly on you." Mitchell leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. "What do you want, Victoria? More money? The house in Aspen? Another adjustment to the settlement? Perhaps I simply wanted to remind you of the consequences of betrayal," she replied, her practiced smile slipping to reveal the bitterness beneath. "You humiliated me, Mitchell. Made me a punchline in our social circle. Did you think I would simply accept that and disappear gracefully?" "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly. "Our marriage was a mutual arrangement that served us both. You knew that from the beginning." "I knew you married me for my family connections," Victoria agreed, reaching for her champagne again. "I didn't realize that included the freedom to sleep with every desperate woman who caught your eye." Mitchell accepted the barb without visible reaction. "The past can't be changed, but we can determine how we move forward from here." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm listening." "I'm prepared to renegotiate our settlement," Mitchell stated. "Additional financial compensation, property transfers, within reason. In exchange, you cease all attempts to interfere with my relationship with Lottie and our daughters." A calculated smile spread across Victoria's features. "So the mighty Mitchell Santner does have a price after all. Those illegitimate brats and their mother must mean more to you than I realized." Mitchell's jaw tightened momentarily, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "My terms are generous but not unlimited. You have 24 hours to consider." Victoria leaned back, studying him with cold assessment. "And if I find your offer insufficient? If I decide that watching you lose something you actually care about is worth more than money?" "Then I release everything," Mitchell replied, his voice dropping to ensure only she could hear. "The recordings of you discussing how to maximize the divorce settlement with your attorney before we even married. The offshore accounts where you've hidden assets from tax authorities. The details of your affair with Senator Williams during our marriage." Victoria's perfectly composed expression faltered. "You're bluffing." In response, Mitchell slid a small digital recorder across the table, pressing play. Victoria's voice emerged, crystal clear. "The prenup is irrelevant. Once we're married, I'll have enough leverage to ensure a settlement far beyond its terms. Mitchell's reputation means everything to him." He stopped the recording, meeting her stunned gaze. "I've always protected myself, Victoria. The difference now is that I'm protecting something far more important than money or reputation." For perhaps the first time in their relationship, genuine respect flickered in Victoria's eyes. "You really have changed," she observed, almost to herself. "The Mitchell I married would never have put family above business." "I'm not the man you married," he agreed quietly. "I'm trying to become someone better." Victoria considered him for a long moment before nodding once, decisively. "Have your attorney contact mine tomorrow. I believe we can reach an arrangement that satisfies us both." She gathered her designer handbag, preparing to leave. "For what it's worth, I hope you succeed, becoming this better man. It would be a novel experience for you." After she departed, Mitchell remained at the table, tension slowly easing from his shoulders. The confrontation had gone as planned, Victoria's fundamental pragmatism prevailing over her desire for revenge. With her neutralized one significant threat to his developing relationship with Lottie, and the twins had been eliminated. But addressing the external obstacle was only the beginning. Mitchell knew the greater challenge lay in proving to Lottie, and perhaps more importantly, to himself, that his transformation was genuine and lasting. That evening, after his usual visit with the twins, Mitchell found himself lingering in Lottie's kitchen, helping clean bottles while she prepared the girls for bed. Such domestic tasks would have been unthinkable to him a year ago, beneath his station, a waste of his valuable time. Now he found unexpected satisfaction in these simple contributions to his daughter's care. When Lottie returned from the nursery, she found him writing in a leather-bound journal, his normally decisive handwriting slower and more thoughtful than his business scrawl. "What's that?" she asked, curiosity overcoming her usual careful distance. Mitchell glanced up, a hint of vulnerability crossing his features before he masked it. "My therapist suggested I keep a journal. To process thoughts I have difficulty expressing verbally. Is it helping?" "Surprisingly, yes." He closed the book, his finger marking his place. "It forces me to examine motivations I previously ignored, patterns I never questioned." Lottie settled into the chair opposite him, her expression thoughtful. "Like what?" Mitchell hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the personal disclosure, but pushing through that discomfort. "Like why I viewed relationships as transactions rather than connections. Why I equated control with security." He met her gaze directly. "Why I treated you as I did that night, despite sensing you were different from the beginning." The reference to their first encounter hung between them, acknowledged but not yet fully addressed. In the months since the twins' birth, they had carefully navigated around that painful origin point, focusing instead on their daughters and the present. "And have you found answers?" Lottie asked softly. "Some," Mitchell admitted. "My father's business failure when I was 14 shattered our family. We lost everything: home, status, stability. My mother left. He turned to drinking. The painful memories reflected in his eyes. I swore I would never be vulnerable like that again. Never depend on anyone. Never lose control. Lottie's expression softened at this glimpse into the wounded boy beneath the powerful man. So you built walls.